My name is Adam, and many of you have met me. I run a little company called Lingoport, and we do a lot of internationalization services in this product, Globalizer, so I'm going to go first. So I'm the first victim together with Olivier Lubibon, and he is a globalization lead at Lingoport. And what we're going to show you is Globalizer, which is a static analysis tool. Anybody know what static analysis means? Quite a few of you. It looks at source code at the source level rather than being in this iterative testing loop. You find internationalization issues at the source level. And then there are three parts to Globalizer. Very quickly, what you're seeing is the login for the server. The reason why there's a server is every internationalization project is different, right? So you need a common configuration that you can spread amongst your development teams. Again, not one person internationalized, teams internationalized. So we conglomerated the behavior of how Globalizer would run into a server configuration that is quite distributable. And then there is a client, the Globalizer client, which will be full of data once we scan something, pulls the rules down from the server. Your code is not submitted to the server. The client pulls the rules down from the server, runs locally on your machine, and finds internationalization issues. There's a second client, which isn't very exciting to demo, but it is a command line. It can automatically be part of your continuous integration, automatically check when you develop source code that it is internationalized. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Olivier, who will probably spend a lot of time with the client.
So what we have here is a tool that's geared at software developers. Software developers have a task of sifting through thousands, maybe millions of lines of code to try to identify itinerant issues. Once they identify those issues, how to deal with them, how to manage those issues so that you know that you've dealt with them, you've externalized strings, you've refactored some methods that are specific to locale, you've addressed some resources that are specific to your particular environment. To do that, in Globalizer here, first of all, there is a source tree. There's a scan result. That's where all your issues are going to be organized. They're going to be organized in that scan results. Then you'll be able to see the specific issues in source files, and there will be a quick summary here. What I'm going to do is launch a first scan, and that scan is applied to something that's called, here we have organized 3 different scans, and we're going to do something for a Java language. So let's say that you have an application, something that needs to be internationalized, so really on the software engineering side. You run the scan, it goes to the server that Adam described before, and the server contains the logic on how to scan for things, what to look for, what are the rules that you're using in order to go through the code that you have, sift through those millions of lines of code or thousands of lines, and try to detect what could be an itinerant issue. So you see here it says retrieving rule set, which is something that is on the server, and now it goes against something that you configure on the scan, and it looks at specific issues. So what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to look at the organization of those issues. It's organized along 3 different big categories. There's the embedded strings. I think everybody's aware of what an embedded string is. Something that is hard-coded in the code, and in order for that string to be passed over to a translation or to a localization team, it needs to be first pulled out into a resource file, right? So if I look at this guy here, there's, for example, this, I double-click on this line, and I see a J label, which is usually like a button that you see, or a text that you see on a user interface. So this is software, this is Java in that particular instance, and it says, show me that string. Well, something that you may want to do is externalize that string, right? So I'm not going to show everything here, but just to show how that would be externalized, based on the configuration that you've done for your scan, you're just going to do this, externalize selected string, and it's going to tell you, when you click, I'm going to do the externalization of that particular string. You could have thousands of them, actually, that you'd want to do at once. So I'm just going to do that here. And it replaced that line with a resource handler getting the string based on an ID, right? So just very briefly here, what I've done is that I've identified a particular ITNN issue, and the way I've dealt with it is to correct it in the code. Now there are other things that you can do, like what I see is a warning here, or some of the things I'm going to search for specific items in the results that I have, and what I'm going to look for in the code lines are debug statements like cat.debug, and it's debug, D-E-B-U-G. I want to find them, and when I go through them one by one, I'm going to say, well, those cat.debug, they have a specific pattern, and that pattern says, this is not a user visible string, it's really for developers or IND to then go back and try to analyze what went wrong. So I don't want to, okay, so I'm going to filter them out. And to filter them out, what I'm going to do is go back to the server here. I'm going to back to the specific rule set that I'm dealing with today, which is this one here. And I'm going to configure a way to filter out of my results things that I don't want to see. And you see that I've already prepared demo debug here. I'm going to activate it. Otherwise, I would just write a little pattern that would say, don't look at those when you give me a result set. And when I rerun the scan here, I go back to the server, I use the newly configured rule set that I'm done, and I'm running over again the Java source code. And now the debug statements are not part of my result sets. They are part of filtered result sets. So other things that you may want to deal with are locale sensitive methods. If there are break iterators or specific date format, for example, maybe you want to deal with that from a software engineering perspective, or maybe you want to ignore those issues. One of the things that you may want to do is, that particular one, I've discussed it with my development team, and they say that one is fine. So for the class of date format that have that particular pattern, I'm going to say, well, let's change the status and let's ignore that particular one. So I'm going to manage those issues directly from the tool here. Also, in order to get some help on the specific items, because you're going to go from C# to Java to JavaScript to a bunch of different languages, you need to have some help to guide you through those issues. What are the issues? Why did I detect that? And a really easy way is to have, for the software developer, what is the ITNN issue and the suggested replacement. I usually do that in 45 minutes, and so we're going to go a little faster here.
I'm going to actually close it out. I would say the last thing is that all of this can generate reports that can be in a very wide variety of formats. The ones that get used the most are Excel, that provide detail and summary of issues and really help to get metrics. It runs fast, it runs on a lot of code. We'll regularly point this at millions of lines of code, and it really helps organize your internationalization effort, either on a first instance for a product that's never been internationalized, or maintaining internationalization over time as you have various product backlogs and scrums as you move forward. There's a lot of distribution of needed ongoing internationalization, and helps maintain that. All right, I'm going to cut that short now, and now we're going to, as we're switching PCs, any questions?
Do you support Flash?
We do not support Flash at this moment.
Bummer.
It's usually, Globalizer was written into the design is to be able to add on supporting programming languages rather aggressively and rather quickly. So the current it's a very wide range of programming languages that's supported right now. For instance, right now the heavy request is for Qt and for Flex. So I think we'll be going that way. We release like every quarter, so there's a lot of stuff. If you need Flash, definitely talk with me. I'll say that we're having a lot of meetings with Adobe lately, so that may get escalated. Any other questions? All right. Great job.
Xcode?
Xcode. I don't know what Xcode is.
I mean,
like.
for iPhone apps and things.
Okay.
Objectives.
Use Flash.
Objectives.
No, I don't know the answer
Okay.
to that one. There are cases where we may not like for instance, for Flex, I'll use that as an example. We do support certain scripting languages, and Flex is close enough that, like, we've done a Flex, an internationalization project that included a lot of Flex. We do a lot of services as well. And when we basically took a current language that we supported and just adapted it slightly, and then it worked rather well, for instance. But it's a little different than a specific targeted parser and default rule sets that are set up. That's always the best. I think we've got to move on. So,
Yeah.
Ken,
Okay.
if you'll introduce yourself.
I'm Kent Taylor, I'm the Senior Vice President and founder of acrolinx North America. And I'm not going to tell you about myself, I'm just going to zoom right in. So I'm going to talk about information quality management, and to set the stage, I want to first define information quality. It's basically conformance to your own style guide, using consistent terminology and phraseology, correct grammar and spelling, clear messaging, and concise is good, less is more, especially when it comes to translation. So what is quality management or information quality management? Formal quality management requires three basic components. One, you have to have standards, which every publishing operation has. Typically a spelling dictionary, grammar and style rules, industry and corporate terminology, and maybe reusable phrases and sentences. Again, consistency is a real key. Once you've got standards, you have to be able to measure conformance to those standards. Two different ways. Quality assurance, which is basically real-time feedback to the writers and editors, hopefully in their normal working environment. And the second type is quality control, which is independently generated metrics and reporting at different handoffs in the process, and certainly at the final delivery point. How do you do this in the information supply chain? Do it two ways. With quality assurance, that's the feedback to the people that actually touch the content, change the content, create the content. And quality control wherever there's a handoff point. Those of you who sat through Bill Sullivan's presentation this morning, this is pretty much how they're setting up to operate. They've had a process in place for a very long time. It works. They're saving millions of dollars a year by managing the quality and translatability of the content that goes for the localization. How do we fit into the picture? We have a system that's client-server based. The server houses all the heavy lifting equipment, natural language processing engine, and analysis algorithms and reporting algorithms. The interaction with the people who are doing the job is through their authoring environment, with toolbar plugins to most of the common authoring environments. That's enough. Let's leap into a demo, see what it looks like. You all recognize a Word document. System works the same in Word, FrameMaker, XML, ArborText, blah, blah, blah. From a writer's perspective, by the time you leave here in the 7 minutes, you'll be expert acrolinx IQ operators. This is the training. Instead of using this button for spell check, use this one instead. So give that a click. What happens during the check? This client strips the text out of the open document, sends it to the server. The server does its analysis, comes back with the results. Found 4 spelling issues, 2 grammar issues, blah, blah, blah. Generated a quality score, which is like golf. It's basically a normalized error rate. Low scores are good, high scores are bad. It's pretty clear from the indicator that this is not really a great document. Looking at the score, it's a horrifying document. Okay, push the button again, now it just looks like spell check. Everybody knows how to use it. You click on something that's highlighted, the different colors mean different things. Green is a style, readability, or translatability issue. Avoid future tense. Everybody knows how to fix that. I'm not going to do it because it takes too long for me to type, but I will go ahead and edit that. Spelling works like you would expect it to, red. It's a spelling issue, drop it in. Where our spell checker is significantly different than other off-the-shelf spell checkers is with misspelling of technical terms or industry terms. A misspelling the chassis like this with most spell checkers will bring up somewhere between 15 and 25 choices, including very interesting words like cheeses and cashews and cassis, my all-time favorite, cayuses. We work against domain-specific dictionaries that would tune the company's content. With a small number of relevant terms, just drop it in. Another color that we check here, the magenta, is about terminology. There are three major types of terminology. First one is about branding. InfiniBand should have an uppercase B. How many creative ways do writers create their own versions of your trademarks, service marks, and product names? Plenty. Another type of terminology issue is about translatability and readability. How many ways can you say check? You can check, you can make sure, you can be sure, you can confirm, validate, verify, blah, blah, blah. For translation purposes, general rule is one concept, one word, one translation. This particular company likes the unambiguous term make sure as opposed to check. This is the only place where we're going to do global operations. I can either ignore or replace an old document. We understand the law of unintended consequences, but if this style guide says always instead of check, you're pretty safe. But the natural language processing that runs the system understands the difference between parts of speech, can infer parts of speech from sentence structure. In this case, we're only going to replace the verb form of check with make sure, so I feel really safe. Boom, okay, did it in three places. And I'll just point out that we didn't suggest make sure boxes, where check was used as an adjective, and didn't ask you to send cash, make sure, or money order. Other translation issues, we have a set out of the box of about 90 rules. Probably 15 of them are directly impact readability and translatability. This is one of them. Fill the topspin registration form out online. It's perfectly fine for a native speaker, rather confusing for a non-native speaker, pretty much impossible for machine translation to figure out that fill and out are actually one verb. Might have to read that sentence several times to straighten it out. So again, easy drop-in solution. Real common translation issue, or translation cost issue, actually. Unnecessary words. We've got a collection of about 100 phrases like this that don't really add anything to the sentence other than 25, 30 cents each per language to translate. So we'll flag them, the writer can make a choice. Same thing with ambiguous modifiers. How much easier is very easy than just easy? Do you need that word? Eliminate it. These two tricks, plus a couple others, typically add up to somewhere between 3 or 4% to as much as 15% of the words that go to translation. So, easy way to reduce cost. Okay, that's the general idea of feedback, quality assurance, feedback to the people doing the job. I'm going to leap into intelligent reuse at the sentence level. This is a collection of sentences we harvested from a corpus. They all say the same thing in different words. They're introduced in the package list that follows. We have an approved, correct, unambiguous sentence in a reuse repository. That's what we would like you to use. You can just drop it in. This is an easy match. A fuzzy match would catch it, no problem. But we're not doing fuzzy matching. We're doing linguistic matching or meaning-based matching. And we'll catch other sentences that no fuzzy match in the world would catch, as long as it has the same meaning. Double check to be sure, blah, 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 has the same meaning, same suggestion. Another one that always amazes me, your topspin shipment includes the following material, almost no words in common, but still the same meaning, still the same suggestion. Last, I want to jump into the quality control part of the equation. We have a batch checking capability, and I've already run the check. I'm just gonna look at the aggregated results of that check, and I'll see all of the, kind of a summary of what was found, checked some files, found some flags. I can see over here, if I move over a little bit, a bad score, and not an acceptable score. I need to look at the details. Now I can see all of the individual files, color-coded red, yellow, and green. If I have to ship these guys next week, I know exactly which ones to focus on. I know I'm not going to bother with the green ones. They meet my expectations. Probably going to start with the red ones and look at some of the worst ones first. Click on it. Takes me directly to a checking report that shows me everything that the writer saw if they ran a check, along with some demographic information. I can immediately identify the root cause of the problem and move on to see what Kemp did this time. Okay, not really good at following the style guide, probably some terminology issues, and my 7 minutes is up.
Nice job.
You guys are real good speed listeners.
While we do the questions, switch PCs. Questions? I loved seeing that. I thought that was really cool. Go ahead.
Can we run AcroCheck against websites?
Yes. The batch checker, we can point it at a URL, crawl it as deep as you want, come back with how good or not your website or your competitor's website might be.
And can you use it for other things? Like earlier I asked a question in the other room while you guys were preparing about listening to what people are saying about your products on, let's say, Twitter or Facebook?
Twitter, real time is kind of difficult to keep track. Facebook, we can look through it. If you can get it on your browser, we can basically crawl it. And I'll just add to that a little bit. Not crawl it just for quality, but we can also crawl it for sentiment.
Thank you.
Yes, sir?
That example that you gave there with the word check, which you changed to make sure, are you basing that on a sentence structure? Like you didn't change the word check as in book or check as in mark, so is it more a case of what words are wrapped around it and that decides when to change it and not to?
Yeah, the underlying natural language processing engine can infer part of speech from the sentence structure.
Sure.
And, the checkboxes, it's pretty obvious that it's an adjective-noun combination, or at least in the system.
And then follow-up question to that, like you had one example there of the I think you said fill out such and such. In places like the UK, they use the word fill in such and such. So would it have smarts to be able to know how to handle that type of thing?
Yes.
Okay.
Switch on, switch off.
Sure.
And anything that you can, that's a two-part verb, will pretty much get it all. Yes.
You showed the example of identifying similar phrases in similar sentences. Is it only within a document, in a set of documents, or can you run that against an existing translation memory, so basically point them to existing translations?
That's where we generally go. We can either harvest those reusable sentences from a TM or from a complete corpus. It's just a matter of pointing the checking system at the target. Yes?
Do you have any comments about using this on more software type of strings or text? Do you hear the examples are more kind of pages?
Ooh, I love a straight man. That's one of my favorite things to point the sentence harvester at. We typically find things like 20 or 30 ways to say see your system administrator. That's a big one. In one system we found 51 ways to say the end date should come after the start date. And all of them get translated to multiple languages, and we can knock a lot of cost out of that process. Thank you for that question.
One follow-up question. Are there any special issues in terms of these software strings if they tend to be a little more technical with special variables or other features that relating to the success, the usefulness of running this tool on that?
Right. We really like structured things. We can do a lot more things like in an XML environment or a Java environment where things are predictable. So yeah, we can write profiles to check anything that's, you know, basically human readable text with stuff in it. We can filter the stuff out.
Time for one more question, and then we'll have a second question and answer period here. Go ahead.
It was about the rules you mentioned. So there is a set of embedded rules and you can customize them then based on the customer
Right.
needs?
We analyzed a lot of style guides. We found that somewhere between about 85 and 95% of everybody's style guide is the same as everyone else's. The basic rules of good writing are the basic rules of good writing for everybody. That's the set we start with. We've developed several hundred additional rules to address that other 10 to 15%. So it's pretty much, it's more like configuration than customization. It's getting to be real unusual where we'll find a customer with a rule that we haven't already developed.
All right. I do ask you to write your questions down that we don't get to, and then we'll have just like a few minutes at the very end. We're doing great on time. Next up is Jeff Kent from Sajan, and take it away.
Sure thing. For those of you that don't know me, Jeff Kent is my name. I work for Sajan. I'll be demonstrating a product that we call GCMS, or the Global Communication Management System. And it's a TMS. It's a translation management system. Just like these other products, impossible to show in 7 minutes. But I've created a highly caffeinated demo here that hopefully I can fly through and get some good breadth of what the system provides. Really focusing on automation of workflows, centralization of translation memory, and then really the data that gets built underneath it. How we can use that data to enable better business decisions, to make sure that you're getting out of your TMS what you had hoped and paid for. So I'm going to log into a portal here as a user. It's a role-based application, so when I log in here, depending on who I am, I'm going to see some different items inside the system. You can see navigation along the left-hand side. You can build a hierarchy of users and control who sees what inside the application, as I mentioned. Some analytics along the top bar here, projects by month, TM utilization, and on-time percentage over the last year, as well as some communication tools that are built into it, alerting, forming that's built into the product. Any projects that you have open would show in this list here, My Projects grid. I don't know if most, but certainly a large percentage of customers that use GCMS don't submit projects through a portal and track them through the portal. They're connected directly into their business systems, their systems of record, their content systems. So they'll show items like this that are, all of these functions are exposed over web services and can be consumed from those environments as well. They don't want to learn a new tool or get into a new application. You can submit a project at any time through here. As I mentioned, it's more of the manual way to do it. Generally, we see projects come in through web services or automation. But I'll click in this just to give you a feel for what the web form looks like. I won't go all the way through a project request, but it should give you a good idea. Capture a base set of information, how you want to divide up your organization. You can put in project description inside there. Grab your languages that are part of this project, source and target languages. Of course, they're filtered down to the language set that you would use in your environment. The last section on this page is where we apply what's called a translation memory search sequence. A lot of words there, but really what that means is that we store translation memory centralized, one physical repository, but we allow you to logically divide it up into different contextual levels. So if I'm submitting a document, you can see here in the dental division in this organization, I may first want to look across just that translation memory that's specific to dental expense, and then as a secondary search, look across all of dental. Really is what this is showing here. You can submit projects that way. Capturing some of this information up front then, of course, allows us to automate much of the workflow once a project does indeed get created. The second page is just adding your files to the project, so I won't go into that in detail here today. I will jump to a project that has some work done on it. Again, down to the My Projects grid here, if I click into a project that has been submitted to the translation management system, there is a set of data. This is the information we filled out as part of the request. You can jump to a project plan. Now, this project plan is where the workflow comes in. Defined based on file type or based on really any piece of metadata, we can control what workflows get created. You can see just a standard one I created here. segmentation, pulling the text from the folder of the document, comparing against translation memory, routing out to a vendor of choice, or you can even have machine translation in here if you want with the post-editing process. Really, these are very dynamic and configurable based on project. You can override at the project level, but you can set many of these up in advance, and then based on what's coming in for that project, it will create your workflows for you. Then inside these workflows, as a customer, instead of submitting your project and hoping that it gets done in time and not really knowing that it's late until it's late, we provide full transparency, real-time workflow. So you can see here for those 3 files that were submitted on this project, you can see who's responsible, what their due date was, and what the status of that task is. So as things maybe start to trend late, or you have a certain language that's maybe falling behind, as you probably all know, these workflows can get very complex. Right? A simple example of 10 files into 10 languages, you have 100 outputs, and they can all move through at different speeds depending on who has that project on their desk at any given point in time. All of those resources log into this system to get their content, or get their task anyway. As we do allow stages and gates, we love working with tools just like the first 2 you saw here today, where we can export content out of the system and then bring it back in as part of that workflow as well. So we're really just managing the tasks at that point, not doing the work inside of the TMS directly. We do supply a graph here as well. As I mentioned, they can all move through at different speeds. You can see here, same information. This is just the milestones now. It's just sliced a little bit differently. The milestones are now horizontal across the bottom. You can see our 3 files going into our 4 target languages. 2 of them are complete. Any completed files you can download directly from the portal here as well. So I click this, you'll see the 2 that have been completed. I'll be able to pull those down into my environment. Again, many times we've automated that step, and we're connected back to that system of record, that content system on the other end, where that file is delivered back to that system to pick up generally the workflow into publication on that end. All right, I got a few minutes here. One last thing I'll talk about is really, it's the data that we're capturing as part of this centralized system. Both the business process data and the translation memory data allow us to put a business intelligence tool on top of this and allow you to either create your own reports, use reports that we've defined to create key performance of the system, and you can subscribe to those reports, have them delivered to your email, or you can log in and pull those reports down directly. I created some here, and in the interest of time I've got them in slides. This may be difficult to read, but this one is TM utilization trending over the last 12 months. You can see how many new words you sent through the system. You can see how many duplicate words that are tracked through, all the different word types that you may have that flow through the system. Cost savings analysis. You can get down to where the rubber meets the road, right? How much are you saving here as a percent? This one is as a percentage of overall spend. This is broken out by language. You can see the percentage savings as a factor of, again, overall spend. Segment level revisions. We can get really granular here because the translation memory is centralized. We can create reports that if your approvers, for example, say you have in-country approvers that are approving content, and you find that they're updating more than 5% of the segments, is the example I have here, a report will automatically be created. You can see the 5.98 is highlighted. That's an anomaly that we can create a report, kick that report off to you, and then you know you're armed with that information. You can find out why, right? And inside the system, you can require them to give a reason why, so you may know. Maybe it's something that's subjective. It's linguistics, right? Maybe it's just style, or maybe it's accuracy, terminology misuse, things that are obviously much more important. And this is the one I just mentioned as well, where you can see what types of errors were happening inside the system. And of course, you can get at task timelines, really the workflow part of the application. As projects are tracking through the system, you can either at an aggregate level see how it's performing, or you can scale down to a very granular level of a project and see how items are tracking through the system. That's what I'll have.
Wow. Questions? Great.
So, a question for Sajan. If you have a minute left, could you show us the Linguist view of your tool?
What we do, we have we can certainly take this offline as well. We have what we call the GCMS Linguist Workbench, which is a tool that linguists can use to perform their task in that workflow. So when they get their task, you can, as a corporation, mandate what the linguists use, but we don't generally see that. It usually is a type of kit that you want to perform your work.
Oh,
You can pull it down and use your own environment. If you have tools that you use that you've invested capital in and you want to use, continue to use, certainly would support that. But we do also provide a linguist workbench that allows you to perform those functions right inside of GCMS.
and then Workbench is a desktop workbench and not part of this online tool?
It's a hosted application, so they're all connected over web services, just a different view into the same application. It's an online-offline application, so you can use it online or offline. I like to, when I describe it, think of it as how a lot of the email clients are, where you're on a plane, you can still work on your email, you're just not connected, right? You can still work on your translation project.
Yeah.
When you reconnect, of course, then it'll sync back on.
What does pre-translate involve in your case?
That might be
It's kind of an ambiguous term that different people use differently.
Yeah, it's really comparing translation memory for its reuse. It's reusing segments that have been translated and approved before. Previously, human translated segments. And then, of course, that brings down the total overall word cost because those are filled at generally cheaper.
And you of course support XML or files, Ruby on Rails, YAML.
We do. Fortunately and unfortunately, our inputs are infinite. So we do spend a decent amount of time in the weeds there of creating the filters on the front to get the translatable text out, or reusing filters that already existed.
Great, thank you.
Other questions? Great.
I'm just curious about, each of these tools seems to have a server connection, so could you just talk about working offline, so like for acrolinx or Globalizer, if you're in a company that doesn't have a connection, which actually I'm finding out is true in a lot of countries, you know, what are the limitations if you're offline or disconnected scenario for maybe all three tools?
Can I defer that to at the end, because I'm leaving time at the end for questions that maybe address everybody, if that's okay.
Sorry, I thought this was...
No worries. We have one more presenter. We have one presenter that for some reason was not on the sheet. So we actually have less time than we think, but I think we have enough. Any other questions still? Okay. I'm going to take a little extra time to introduce Daniel, because I have a real personal connection. At this conference, I met Daniel in person, I think, for the first time at this conference, at the first Worldware. We became friends, and I said to Daniel, we were talking about WYSIWYG interfaces and the like, and a lot of the common tools, and I said, you know, it's really a shame that a lot of the common WYSIWYG environments for seeing a product in context were really just for, frankly, an older architecture that's, you know, it's necessarily a good architecture for some products, but not for multi-tiered architecture. So they were client-based software that, you know, ran on. You could have these tools like Catalyst, Solo, great at what they were doing, but you couldn't really see in a dynamic web application what was going on under the hood with client-server applications where the interface could be quite database-related and distributed all over the place. And Daniel said, I have an idea. And I'm happy to say that his idea is no longer just running on a PowerPoint operating system. So Daniel's sure.
Yeah, so actually I think we met in Madison in Lockwell. That's
Oh, in Lockwell.
yeah, it was Lockwell. So a few comments before I start. I have 7 minutes. So first, most of it will be actually on PowerPoint. So I'm the co-founder, co-owner of RIGI Localization Solutions, which is named after Mount Rigi in Switzerland. This picture is taken from my balcony.
Be jealous.
Yeah, be jealous. Okay. Actually, I'm moving in 2 weeks to my next startup, which is Microsoft. But basically, I'm still. This is my baby that is continuing to run. The point here, let's try to activate the PowerPoint. Yeah, that is really to do WYSIWYG localization for web-based application. So when we think about web-based application, I don't want you to think about static HTML. Static HTML is something that we know to build, but think about your online banking account, booking system, your airline, that actually everything is generated on the fly. So we have a little string, but we have no idea how it's going to be rendered, how it's going to look. And this is the challenge. A few words about context. So we really believe it's all about context. And think about the translator that is trying now to solve the puzzle. And well, this part there doesn't belong to this box actually. When the kids, you know, just
arrange everything. They took one part of the puzzle and put it in another box. So how do you know it? You know, think about the feeling of doing translation without context. It's actually quite the same. Or, you know, we tell, well, you know what, I won't give you all the parts, just do the delta. You know, we'll take those 10 parts and try to build the puzzle, and this will be difficult. Or even Worldware, you can give the puzzle to someone and say, well, I won't give you the final picture or the final image, just try to build this 2,000 parts puzzle without knowing how it's going to look like. So this is the feeling of doing translation without context. And I have several examples. So basically, translator gets those lists, and they need to translate, which is fine, maybe, but if you think in an application, a short chunk of text, it's not that, you know, I'm translating now a document or a book that clearly the context is a flowing text. It's non-linear because I don't know the order. The fact that there's one word that is coming after another string doesn't mean that they are related. Some string might not be used. You know, we have a lot of zombies and nobody dares to delete the string because maybe someone is using it or will use it or whatever. And clearly those issue of string lengths. So the German example is always skip versus überspringen or undo something. You have a GUI UI skip and you need to fit, pronounce it correctly, überspringen, something like that, yeah? Yeah, I'm working on that. I live in Switzerland right now, but my German is non-existent, except kein Deutsch. So if you want to translate the word display into German, so the question is it a noun or is it a verb? Yeah, so without knowing the context, we have some potential errors that work for the translation. So yeah, really, is it a display or display this, etc. So many interaction between the LSP engineers to understand. We need to do intermediate build because we want to run and do checks, and the quality is bad, etc. Long term, well, all the point is a lot of testing in the end. So we're trying really to lower costs, etc. And now it's time for the demo. Just our idea. So our idea is actually very simple. And this is the idea. So if you think of a web-based application, we have an internet server. It's extremely simplified here. Usually it's not for people with a technical background. So you have the internet server that behind with all the multi-tiers, you have the presentation layer and business logic and databases and whatever. And you have somewhere the resource files. Yeah? We assume that everything is internationalized. So what we do actually, that we inject invisible fingerprints into the resource files. We don't need to rebuild the application. Yeah? We just pseudo-localize all the resource files, but we inject invisible fingerprint. And those fingerprints are unique. We know how to calculate them in a unique way. And then we can put something, a sniffer or monitor the HTTP. And we can identify now a fingerprint that are somewhere in the stream. And we can build now a cross-reference index. So now for every HTTP page, for every HTML page or JavaScript, or every content which is coming from the server, we can identify which resource actually belongs. So yeah, that's it actually. So based on that now we have a few applications. So we have applications which are actually online, so really you can run your web-based application and you have the tools. So right now we wrote a plugin for SDL Parcel, we are technology partners of SDL. And you can do the translation, just walk through the site and do the translation. And the translation are not stored in the site, they are stored in a temporary repository, but later deployed into to the resource files as resource files and can be deployed to the system. And we have also kind of an offline version that I will demo in a minute. So, as I mentioned, load fingerprint resource, monitor the HTTP, create a cross-reference, and clearly we assume, I know that assumption is the mother of all, perhaps, but we assume that code is internationalized, yeah? 3 minutes, yeah, okay, I need another 2 minutes. To answer Danica potential question, yes, we think that we support Flash. We didn't implement it. We know how to do it using Flex, actually. We have a full support in Silverlight. Very generic, so every Silverlight application too. So it's not related to the web, but Silverlight is there. basically the trick with Flash is that the Flexer has an API for accessibility, and we can somehow via this communicate those things. Demo. So the demo will take 30 seconds, I hope so. More. So basically, so this is on Passerlo, SDL Passerlo. So basically, this is the string list that usually the translator will see. We added a few columns. This column, for instance, there's a problem of viewing, is actually when we are in this version, what we do, we run crawlers that are actually crawling the whole site. We're training the crawlers, and dumping the whole site on HTML files, but now with our signatures. So we know exactly for each string how many preview every string in each, how many HTML is being used, and we need to check, because actually we should aim that it will be used only once. So if it's twice or more, is it a header, is it a shared messages, maybe it's an edit that once needs to be translated to editer and then next time edition, so we need to check. And if it's 0, we need to come back and say, well, why our crawler didn't manage to get to this string? So it might be because it's a hidden thing, or yet we need to train better our crawler. But this is the point. And then we have those HTML file here that includes our resource, and we can now do the translation. And you see file manager, so I'll just write something here. And you see that it's reflected here. It's not stored in the HTML here. It's just to show it to the translator. It's actually stored in Passerlo, currently temporary repository, and later the deliverable of the process are the translated resource files. And the translator can jump actually from every page and really translate everything. And we can check in the case that we see something that occurs many times, so there's a functionality that you can see where this is being used in other HTML page, etc., and jump, voila. But this is a bit boring. The point here, that based on this black box approach, that we inject the signature from one side and we monitor whatever is happening on the other side, now we can provide the context. C'est tout.
Very good. Very good. All right, go ahead.
What are you detecting? I still don't get it.
What, sorry?
What are you detecting? I get it that you are adding some code, some invisible fingerprints into the files, and then you're monitoring them. What are you looking for exactly?
Okay, so I will go back to Passerlo here, assuming that we want to translate close. Yeah, so close is actually because of the 7 minutes, there's a file, resource file, that there's an ID 1, 2, 3, 4, and the string close, that needs to be translated to, how it's going to be, no, not in German, in French, I don't know what. In Hebrew, let's go. Go. Okay? So now, I don't want to identify the string itself because it can be closed in many places. So what I'm doing actually, that in this close, the string close in English, I'm embedding a hidden signature that nobody can see. Nobody. Nobody. No. and later, what I'm going to do, this signature actually reflects the ID. Not the text. We don't care about the text. Really, we can translate whatever you want, We don't, everything we want. But just the ID. Now, later, during this tool, this cross-referencing, I'm getting an HTML page. And I'm looking in those HTML page for those IDs, those hidden IDs. And then I know that, hey, I found here change password. So this change password is actually in the file, this resource that was ID 1, 2, 3, 4, change password. Because I have these hidden things that nobody sees. What you don't see right now, that here in old password, that actually this is this ID. You see, I could click actually, what I didn't demo, but I can actually go to identify things and I can find it. And the reason that I can identify it because I have those hidden signature, fingerprint, whatever you call it.
You do that on actual sites or on test sites?
No, of course not on the actual site.
So you do hidden JavaScript and stuff like that?
No. It's the actual site which is running on the staging machine. If you want to mess with your client site, yeah, but our recommendation is use a staging
actual side? Is he then in JavaScript himself?
Yeah, but yeah.
Yeah, you never know.
Yeah, we can do. No, because I wouldn't recommend it for another reason, because this system actually is proven that you know, we can inject a small translator can inject actually JavaScript and do cross,
Yeah.
you know,
yes,
thing like that. So I prefer not to do it on the live site.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
With JavaScript, you can sometimes have a lot of different iterations, like there's an action, if this happens, then this
Yeah.
happens. How do you actually cover all those possible variations in many active pages?
So first, we don't cover everything. We don't promise 100% of 100%. We cannot. We have a framework actually to try to find some heuristic, you know, what is going on. So all the information that came from the server will be displayed. But if it's something that is extremely complex that is happening on the client side, so we're not sure that we need to check case by case. We are not pretending that we can cover 100%. And if someone does, well, is a liar. No, you can't. Okay?
Good, good. Any other questions for Daniel here?
Okay. Go back and see.
I'll mention one thing that, again, Daniel's product is a sniffer. He didn't want to reinvent the interface. There are companies that do that quite well. He likes Pasolo, so he connected with Pasolo. So he focused on that connection. So I thought it was really cool, and I'm really happy to bring it to you today. All right, with that, unbelievably, we are a little ahead of time. So we have 7 minutes for further questions. I'm going to take the first question that was asked about client server. Could you repeat that question?
Yeah, most of these, well, all of these, I think, talked about the client-server connection. So I'm just curious, maybe it's more a question for Globalizer and acrolinx, but if you're in a disconnected environment, can I still, what's the limitation, or what can I do if I'm not connected to the net?
I guess
If I'm a
I'll
writer
ask-
writing documentation, can I still take advantage of these cool tools, or is there certain things that I can download offline and work offline?
Great. For Globalizer, no, you've got to be connected. That's just how it works. Every time you run the client, whether it's in command line or in the sort of IDE-like client interface, the visual interface, it connects to the server every time you run a scan and pulls down those rules, gets updates, coordinates your projects, all that kind of stuff. So it needs to be connected. We do get asked about, well, I want my coder to be able to work on an airplane. Fortunately, airplanes are starting to get more and more internet connections, but most of them still don't. We took that as a user set and said, hey, if we want to concentrate on one thing, it's getting the best results out of a scan quickly and helping people fine-tune their results rather than offline access and caching and that sort of thing. So we kind of left that aside as a user experience that was less important to us than the quality of the data for now.
I want just a word about this. Our first version was completely online, and we had a problem with translator that the client that we pilot with didn't agree, to give VPNs and calls to all the translators. So actually, this brought us to do this offline thing that we're dumping everything and we're shipping a bundle. So this is how we solved it. So in our case.
Great, great. Okay.
And the acrolinx approach, you only need to be connected to the server the minute when you hit the check button. If you run the check while you're in the office, online, and then leave, you still have all the markup and all the feedback.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
And do you want to answer for
Sure. From
Sajan?
a Sajan perspective, those tasks that make sense or have made sense for us, we've developed in the online-offline capability, Linguist type task where they're actually working with the segments. Project manager or somebody that's focused on the application does need to be connected. So it depends on the role of the individual, and that's one of the reasons we've designed and developed the application to have those different views in, to not give you too much to overwhelm, but just enough to perform your task.
Great question from Mike. Any other questions? I have a question. In this, seems like there's a lot more distribution of Mac and PC. We have Android. We have all kinds of OSs now that, there's a different list of OSs that were being supported, say, 10 years ago, commonly on people's desktops. How do the various tools work on just various platforms that people like to work with? I'll let you go first.
Sure, I can speak generically to that. We're browser-based for much of our portal, so we support all the core browsers. The Linguist Workbench, which is the one tool that we really install on the desktop, is cross-platform, so it'll work on a Mac, PC, Unix environment.
Right. Kim?
Well, I have a kind of an easy trick answer to that. Content is content. We really don't care. Now that being said, to operate in the interactive mode, you have to have a client that plugs into your editor. But we can check anything that's human readable text with a badge checker or just by copying to the, you do a copy and paste to your desktop. Once it's in there, we can check it.
Olivia, you want to answer?
answer for Globalizer?
We run kind of everywhere. We kind of run everywhere. I was bummed. I don't really know much about iPads, but I was going to buy one. But unless I make Globalizer an app, I can't install it on an iPad. So I harumphed out of the store and I didn't buy an iPad. But aside from that, we kind of run on everything. And actually, there are some users of our software that call us up and say, "Hey, will it run on FreeBSD?" And I say, "I think so. You want to run it?" And there's no report. We don't test on everything that it's being run on. So, we've seen that hasn't been an issue for us. Any other questions? Great. We got two more. I'm going to take the one in the back because he's all the way here from New Zealand. You just came from San Francisco.
A quick one for Kim, perhaps. Just curious about, you mentioned that your tool uploads the content to a server and does all of this sort of linguistic magic up there. Have you ever met any resistance from potential customers about, IP being perhaps released in the wild, or having that perception?
Most of our customers have the server behind their firewall.
Right.
We do offer hosted service, and we have partners that do SaaS. Then the question there is just how secure is the link between the customer and the server. But most of our customers are fussy about their IP, and they run on a server inside the firewall.
Quick show of hands. Who supports both SaaS and enterprise where you install behind the firewall?
We don't
You don't do that one? Okay. But your translation memory kind of stuff?
Yeah,
Yeah, which is maybe a complement to your question. I mean, usually software development teams, they don't work on airplanes. They work within a company with a certain infrastructure.
I just came back from a trip to India, and I learned that a lot of the big companies there do not allow access to the internet.
Yeah, what I wanted to say is that you can host the server within your infrastructure. Right.
Very good. Okay. Other questions here?
Scott.
Oh,
I just have a quick question for Kent. Kent, if somebody wanted to make the business case for this, in other words, it's cool, to watch tools perform magically in front of an audience at a conference, but sometimes convincing a boss is another story. Can organizations somehow engage acrolinx to run a small subset of their content through the tool so they can, so they can go back to their boss and have something concrete to show?
We've been known to do that.
Okay.
And, just in general, what our customers have found, not us, our customers have found in terms of localization time and cost, somewhere between 15 and 25% reduction. And in terms of editing time and cost, I know this sounds phenomenal, but somewhere between 60 and 75% reduction in editing time, because basically the writers are doing all the copy editing, stuff you have to read word for word to get. That's all being done by the writers. The editors get reports that say it's done, and after about 3 weeks of trying to find issues after the machine setup was done, they stop. They stop proofreading and go directly to developmental editing, which is scanning, and can scan 4 or 5 times faster than you can read. So, that's a couple biggies. And I have to put at least one plug in for machine translation. What we found, the difference between uncontrolled content going to a MT, typically see somewhere around 50% post-editing. Every other sentence needs to be tweaked or rewritten. By understanding what the machine understands and managing terminology